Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Board Game Buffet podcast, episode number 97. My name is Dean.
And this is Graeme.
And Graeme, Mr. Vacation, has returned, coming back from where were you? The French Riviera?
Well, for the first couple of days, yeah. Spent the last of it on the beaches of Milan.
Oh, okay. Just taking a fashion show.
Excuse me.
Were you working? Were you modeling? Is that what the deal was?
Look at this polo shirt. I was the fashion model.
Now, I did see a couple pictures from your vacation, and I told Amy, I said, man, I said, Graham's trying to be all fashionista out there. I said, you had your shorts on with, I don't know what they were on. I couldn't quite make out the little, I say symbol. I'm sure that's not the technical fashion term. Whatever the print was on your shorts. Were those fish or were they?
Oh, the dead fish.
Sailboat? Yes. Is that what they were? Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, look at him. Although I did laugh at the one I said because it was the same picture. And I guess you guys maybe were out geocaching and you had your ball cap on. I said, Graeme does not know how to wear a ball cap. So it was just like sitting on the top of your head. It was kind of like a skew or whatever. And you had your backpack on, your little drawstring backpack. I said, It looks like either a kid off to his first day of school or someone who only put a ball cap on because he was afraid of getting a sunburn. Because I told her, I don't think I've ever seen you with a ball cap on before.
No, I used to wear them a lot when I was a teenager. But yeah, I don't wear them. I wear them basically as functional things to keep the sun out of my eyes.
Right.
It's definitely not a fashion statement. And the ball cap I was wearing was a freebie that I got from a work outing.
Okay. Yeah, it looked like you guys had a good time.
Yeah, it was good time. Because previously we've normally almost always have guests up with us for the week. This was the first time I think in almost 10 years that it's just been the three of us went up. So it was relaxing. Still got games played, but it was nice.
So Gareth actually got his own bedroom this time. He didn't have to sleep on the couch.
Yeah, sometimes he does share the bedroom. Like if we only have one person coming up, because the unit that we have has a master bedroom and a washroom and then a kitchen, dining area, and living room. And then we also have the unit next to us as well, which is a smaller unit, but it's got two beds, its own bathroom, its own kitchen, and all that type of stuff. So if there's only one person coming up with us, then Gareth will share that bedroom. This time he had his choice of both beds. He could have slept in both of them, but he had his own apartment all to himself.
Well, I'm surprised he didn't just push the beds together and sleep across it. As tall as he is, he might need to go go the opposite direction.
Yeah, he almost sleeps diagonally on beds now.
Yeah, I do too, but that's not because of my length. So usually I wake up because I've tossed and turned all night long, and I'm wrapped up inside the comforter, and I'm like one of those little dead fish flailing on the beach, trying to get out of it. Trying to get my little feet. I like my feet hanging out, but I like the rest of me covered. So, all right. Well, very good. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to get away and enjoy some downtime. And I think my family always feels like I'm on vacation all the time because I'm always away, always in a hotel. And I try to explain to them it's not really a vacation. So, but yeah, down here I'm just trying to avoid going outside as much as possible. Because it's nasty.
You had Amy down for the long weekend, didn't you? For 4 days or something like that?
Yeah, she came down for 4 days. She flew in like on a Wednesday night, and I worked on Thursday. So we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday together, and yeah, it was fun. We went. I told her before she came, like, listen, it's gonna be hot. It's hot and humid. I don't know what you want to do outside, but I said it's up to you. You got to plan it. And of course, she didn't plan anything. She's like, well, I looked. She's like, they say there's a beach right around here. I said, yeah. I said, it's not a beach like you there. So we're not right on the Gulf Coast. I'm like, we're like an hour from the Gulf. Like, so any beach around here is going to be like on the lake. It's like the inlet, the Gulf, the inlet, and then like the inland lake. I'm like, it's not going to be the beach like you think it's going to be. And she's like, well, maybe we should go. I'm like, well, so we can drive the hour down to the Gulf. So I don't know, it's water. I don't know what you want to do while you're down there. So as hot as it is. So we never ended up going down. She's like, well, maybe we should go to the casino one night. I'm like, okay. I mean, she doesn't gamble at all. And it was weird that she would even offer it. So I was expecting there was some ulterior motive somewhere involved in there. And of course, when we got there, I'm like, well, we'll go for dinner, whatever. So then, maybe I'll go in and play a little. She's like, oh, look, they have a spa. I'm like, nope. I'm like, I knew I said that was coming. I said, well, look at the prices. She's like, oh my gosh, like it's like $200 for like a 60-minute whatever. I'm like, do you want that? She's like, well, I don't want to pay that kind of price. I'm like, well, I don't think they're going to let you, negotiate a lower price with them. So, and it was packed out. This was a couple weeks ago. So it's before they re-implemented their mask mandate. And I'm telling you, if you didn't have COVID before you went into the casino, you probably had it by the time you came out. I mean, it was shorter. It was a Friday night, I think, or maybe a Saturday night. It was packed out. I mean, we're both active, so I wasn't too concerned about it. Of course, now, with the new variant or whatever, and now they're back. Actually, this week they started again with mask mandates down here. So we'll see.
Yeah, when we were up north, we have stages of reopening. So just when we were coming up, we went into stage 3, which is there's some indoor dining allowed again. We've never got rid of our mask mandate, but we are allowing kind of more people to gather together. And it wasn't busy like it has been, but a lot of the restaurants were still closed for indoor dining. And it was funny because one of the people up there that owns a large restaurant was saying why. So there's 2 reasons. One, they're having a huge labor shortage for the hospitality industry. I don't know what it's like down in the US, but up here, no one wants to come back for those menial, a waitress job or a waiter job, or cleaning rooms or whatever. So they're having a hard time people getting to fulfill those jobs right now. And the second, the guy was saying, because we still have to maintain distances between tables, for us to clean the linen and the cutlery and all that, we can't get enough people indoors to make it economical. So they do takeout, they do curbside pickup and all that, but they said really until we can get back to 100% capacity, we're losing money opening it. So it's better, if you want our food, please, order it online. And again, this is a relatively small community. This isn't like major downtown Toronto. This is a community that's, it's got one main street through it. So it's not like it's huge, right, but it's one of those places where you probably know about half the population if you live there.
So did you guys end up just ordering like food through like Grubhub or whatever, or did you end up just cooking? Or
so we cooked most of the time. It's one of the nice things about this place. We have a full kitchen. We did go out for food one night, like to pick up food, and another night we actually went to the restaurant that's in the resort that we're at, because they're on the ground floor. So what they do is they have an outdoor patio, and they extended the patio basically towards the marina as well. So when you went to get a seat, it's like, do you want to sit inside? Do you want to sit on the patio, or do you want to sit kind of at the extended patio? The extended patio butts up against the parking lot. It's like, I don't think I really want to be sitting in the parking lot eating my food. So we actually ate inside. But because it's on the ground floor and they have a patio, that like one wall is all glass, like glass door. So they basically just had all those doors open. So it's like one large area that's half inside, half outside. So we ate on the inside part because it was warm. It's nice to be in the air conditioning. So, but it was, we were sitting there and the closest table to us was probably about, I'm going to say 15 feet away. Okay. And there's lots of space in between the tables. So, and we're all fully vaccinated as well. So it wasn't I think it's big of an issue.
Yeah. So what I find most frustrating is that, most of the restaurants, at least the ones that I've gone to, which I've been here since the middle of June, is now first week of August. So before Amy came down to visit me, I think I ate out 3 times. It was like 2 fast food restaurants, and then I went to a barbecue place. And so, I wasn't really paying that much of attention to anything, but I did notice that the fast food places, generally those are the ones where the lobbies are still closed and it's just the drive-through. And maybe it's because of lack of employees. I don't know, whatever the case may be. But I find that really annoying because I can't fit through most drive-throughs with my work vehicle. I'm too tall. And so that kind of limits, as to what I can go there, which I mean is frustrating, but at the same time, it's like, whatever. I just go to the grocery store and I just buy stuff. Not that big of a deal. But so speaking of the impact of COVID and pandemic or whatever, I see that one of our publishers is no longer with us, and I'm not saying that they're blaming it on COVID and not believing them. I'm just saying they're saying that had a big impact on their business. So of course, I mean, that's Tasty Minstrel Games, and I'm sure it's had to impact a lot of businesses, a lot of publishers, not only with getting product, which I'm assuming that's the most important thing for them because most of them are small staffs anyway. But I would think the sheer number of people buying games had to have skyrocketed during the pandemic. So I'm assuming it's just because they couldn't get their games delivered in time. But you would have thought that, I mean, you would have had some games in the pipeline already, ready to be shipped or already, landed at the beginning of the pandemic. But I mean, I can only go based off what they're saying.
Yeah, it was interesting. I read their press release that they gave out, I think it was in the end of July before they announced that they're fully closing. And they were saying that the pandemic has been good for an awful lot of publishers because more people are buying games, but they were saying their year over year sales were down almost 75%. And I'm kind of like you thinking, but there seems to be so many more people in the hobby. And and this is just going on assumptions, not having any data to back it up. I would assume that people would be playing more games, especially maybe not so much now that things are reopening, but 6-8 months ago when people were still kind of locked indoors, thinking, what else are you doing inside? I mean, if that's your hobby, you have more time to do your hobby. So why aren't you getting more games? And is it because people were worried about their job? Am I going to lose my job, or have I lost my job due to COVID? Therefore, I don't have, expend disposable cash to spend on games, or are people playing online? Because you and I have discussed this. I have a pass to Board Game Arena. I'm a premium member there. That's like $30 a year. And then you and I have Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia. Mm-hmm. And the amount of games we can play on there for free, or Board Game Arena, again, for that couple bucks a month. Why would I buy new games? If you're going to give me everything for free online, I think for you and I, it may be different from the average person because, especially myself, I tend to play a lot of new games kind of back to back. And I may only play them a couple times and then I'm done with them. For me, in that case, places like Board Game Arena or Tabletop Simulator are the perfect venue for me because I get to play it a couple times and I probably will never go back to it. Now, if it's a game I really enjoy, yeah, I'll buy the physical copy. So I have a copy so I can play it whenever I want. But a lot of the new games, you play it 4 or 5 times on Tabletop Simulator and you're done. So if that's also what impacted Tasty Minstrel Games, I don't know. They are saying it was a combination of things of getting stock in. They let go most of their people and it was down to like him and his wife that were running it. He had to go back to a full-time job. They were then saying, we're going to concentrate just on our dice games. They had a game called Martian Dice. And then he was also saying that our dice are selling really well, but a lot of people were saying you get them manufactured in China and all you do is you ask them to put the TMG logo on it. Well, it's nothing special about them. So you're really going to have a business that's going to be on, we're just resellers of dice. And then I think last week, whatever it was, when they basically came out and said they're shutting down completely. I guess they realized that their dice just can't keep them afloat.
And I didn't read in there. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's funny because Dean has always mocked me for liking TMG games because he's always called them, middle of the road, mediocre games.
I think TMG is a perfect example of a publisher that is just right there in the middle. They never were able to find, at least I don't believe they've never been able to find that evergreen game that's just going to be a cash cow for them, where they can, do expansions and it's going to carry them. They've got solid games. I mean, don't get me wrong, I own a lot of TMG games, and there are some ones that are, I mean, they're good, solid games, but they were never going to be a ticket to ride. They weren't going to be a wingspan or something like that, where it's going to be, you're going to make money just by that one game over and over again. And so that's probably kind of hurt them, obviously. I mean, every publisher wants that, but at the same time, you know, they didn't just publish bad games. I mean, they had some that were bad, but every publisher has some games that are just bad. They were right there to me. They were right there in the middle of the road. Their games were going to be okay, but for me, they weren't going to, knock your socks off. What I do think that maybe hurt them, and I could be wrong on this, is that, their business model was very much centered upon those deluxified games. And let's import some Euro games, let's deluxify them and pump them out. And I mean, they were nice. I mean, their bits were nice, but I question, I guess, whether or not there was really a big enough market for that. Because I would imagine that if you already own the Euro game in its base form, unless you truly love it, were you going to go out and buy the upgraded version? And I don't know if you could just buy the upgraded bits or if you had to buy the whole new game again. I own one of their deluxified games, but I don't know that. I don't know how strong the market was for those things. And I think they did them on Kickstarter. I think most of them were Kickstarter games. So obviously, I mean, there was some limited liability or some limited, I guess, risk involved in that. You could kind of control that. But I wonder with the pandemic and people maybe aren't buying as many games, are they going to buy the blinged out deluxified version? Or if they were already sold out of those games because they did so well, can you not get them anymore because they're coming in from China? I mean, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I mean, the long and the short of it is they're no longer publishing. Maybe they come back, in the future. I mean, you never know. They may, but I think I would say it's a sad day because they've been around for a while and their products were fine. But at the same time, it is, I'm surprised it hasn't happened more. And maybe it has happened more, and they're just smaller publishers that, maybe they only had one game ever, and now they're just done because there's nothing else. And we talked about this before. I think that a lot of publishers now, instead of being, hey, I want to be a publisher of this type of game, we're going to focus on this stuff, this either heavy Euros, or we're going to be the filler game company. I think so many publishers now have taken that shotgun approach of let's try to do everything so we can, maybe we hit every little market, we could grab a little piece of each one. And I think it's harder for consumers to be able to judge the not only the games that are coming out, but I think to kind of work their way through the fields and find those couple of games that are going to be best for them. And because of that, and I think the pandemic probably definitely brought a lot more people to the hobby, a lot more people playing games, especially if from May 2020 to May 2021, when I think, by May 2020, people know, okay, this is going to be, we're in for the long haul at this point in time. It's not a fluke. And then, it starts opening back up, at least here in the US, and, late spring of 2021. That's a year of a lot of people buying games, but it's also a year of the ones that could publish. And of course, they were doing this before the pandemic, but, the ones that were pumping out everything under the sun. I mean, just not everything's going to stick.
Yeah. And it's, I have discussed this before of how it seems now that there are so many different publishers out there that some of the older publishers are feeling that they need to do the shotgun approach. And when I look at TMG, I associate TMG with midweight Euros. Mm-hmm. If I went to buy a TMG game, that's what I'm expecting. No matter what box I pick up, that's the type of game I'm expecting them to buy. And I think one of the things that did them in, and you touched on this, was the deluxifying everything. So one of my favorite games from TMG in the last couple of years is Crusaders Thy Will Be Done. They came out with the regular version and the deluxe edition. Well, I don't know how good the game is. So I buy the regular edition. I really enjoyed it. Am I really going to buy it again for the deluxe edition of it? No. So why come out with, unless it's an established game that people are going to love, like Orleans was a good example, because that was a reprint from, was it DLP Games or whatever?
I think so.
Someone published it in Europe. It did very well. So TMG got the publishing rights to North America and did deluxified edition because they knew how many people loved it from Europe. So it's kind of like, this game is going to do well. They were just seeing to publishing everything, whether they thought it was going to do well or not, with a deluxified version of it. It's like, well, why? If it's an unknown game, you're only going to get a subset of people buying it. People like myself who are always buying the new stuff. Well, if we don't know about it, I'm not going to be buying the deluxified version of it. Because if I don't like it, I'd rather waste less money on a game I don't like than spending the deluxified money on it that I don't like. So why publish everything out of the gate with a deluxified version of it?
Well, I think there's a subset of the hobby that, if given choice A or B, and A is deluxified, they're always going to buy that blinged out version. There's some people that just, I'm amazed at the number of people that bling out games, especially when they show the games that they're blinging out. And again, I think it's different because maybe they play that game 50 times a year. Maybe it's their, and I would say if it's your favorite game, go for it. But there are a lot of people that will only, like, if given the option, they're always going to buy the blinged out version. To them, that extra, whatever it is, $30, $40. And it is probably cheaper to buy a blinged out version direct from the publisher than it is to try to bling it out in the aftermarket, because some of those meeple sets are ridiculously priced. But again, there's obviously, they wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't a market for them.
But again, I'd love to hear from our listeners on this as well, that if it's a game, so they reprinted Colosseum. If they came out and said, we're deluxifying Colosseum, which I don't know how you do that over and above the Days of Wonder game, but if they came out and said, we're doing, gold leaf, whatever, and you probably would have got an awful lot of people buying your deluxified version, because you're deluxifying a game that is already a hit. So, which is fine. Again, and if it's a game that you love and you want the deluxified version of it, bling it out as much as you want, because it's money well spent. But if it's a game that you don't know anything about, I'd be very, very hesitant to buy the deluxified edition of it. Like, until you know that this is a hit, or this is a game you're really going to like, are you really going to spend the extra $30? I don't buy deluxified editions anyway, but to your point, some people just like having the deluxified version of it. So if you are a listener like that, does that also make you more picky about which games you buy? Like, if you have a choice of 5 games, you say, you know what, I want the deluxified edition of it. Let me do a lot more research. Let me see how well the game does it on Board Game Geek. Let me play a copy in my local library or con or whatever else before I spend the money on getting the deluxified edition.
It's possible. I think like a game like Colosseum, though, if it's highly ranked, that people would probably assume, this is a top 100 game, now it's deluxified. Oh, it's definitely going to be worth the money.
Yeah, and that's
whether they've played it or not.
Again, if you know that the game is already a hit and you do not own a copy of it, then yes, I would say I would be more inclined to buying a deluxified edition of it. If it is a game that, this is the first time it's coming out, it's a brand new design or whatever else, and we're making a deluxified edition of it, I'd be like, but is the game any good? Right. If it's in the top, if it's in the top 100 or even 500 games, there's probably an awful lot of people that already like it. So it's probably a semi-decent game for a large portion of it. May not be for you, but there's a large number of people that enjoy it. So I'd be more inclined to buy a deluxified edition. If it's a brand new game, new designer, game I've never heard of, it's never been on Board Game Geek before, that deluxified edition is a lot less appealing to me than once an established game.
Yeah, I think Simon kind of ran into that as well a couple years ago when they brought over some Euro games. Didn't they try to make miniatures for?
Yeah, like Council of Four.
Council of Four, and there was it Way of the Panda? Was that theirs as well? Was it
Is it
Wave? I don't.
Path of the Panda?
Yeah, something about
Yeah,
pandas.
I
I think
own
they did the same thing with that.
I own both of those games because Council of Four is a decent game. If I could have got it non-C-monified, I'd much prefer that because it doesn't warrant the minis. And it was funny, I was looking at Ankh just before we started recording because I had some time to waste for Dean to get on. And there are people complaining there that saying this is a typical CMON game in which the minis are front and center, but the game is underbaked. And I don't know anything about Ankh. Like I know how it plays and all that. It doesn't really appeal to me, but I would definitely give it a shot. But I wouldn't be buying it just because I'm looking at it going, again, I got burned so many times by CMON because they put out these great minis. Then the gameplay itself is like, Cthulhu Death May Die. I bet that was the last Kickstarter that I backed. And I'm sorry I backed it because the gameplay in my mind is mediocre at best from two designers that have much, much better games under their belt. You kind of get this mediocre game, but it's got minis in it. It's got a 2-foot mini that I don't know what sane person would buy.
I own 3 of them. Okay, but before we go down this rabbit hole, but CMON's been doing that for a long time. So is that CMON's fault or is that the buyer's fault? Is that your fault? Because you know what the type of games they produce, and you know that you're basically paying for the miniatures, not necessarily the gameplay.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, for a lot of people established in the hobby, they should know that. So you're making a conscious decision to purchase that game. I get if you're new to the hobby, maybe you haven't, you're not quite hip to that. And I'm not trying to say that, that they're doing something nefarious. That's what they do. I mean, that is their business.
Yeah.
And
that's one of the reasons why I no longer buy CMON games. The Cthulhu Death May Die was the last one I bought, and that was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first one I had bought in probably a year before that, because I'm thinking your games are identical. They're fantastic minis, but essentially they're the same gameplay over and over and over again. And I don't want to pay that much money for a game that I feel is mediocre. So I basically stopped buying CMON games. Yeah. And kind of tying it back to TMG, it's like, because a lot of your games are mediocre, you do have some fantastic games that you've put out, but a lot of your games recently have been mediocre. Why would I spend that extra money to buy a deluxified copy of it? And again, with both of them, both CMON and TMG, I'd much rather buy a cheaper version of your game that just has standees in it to give me basically so I can confirm that the game is probably not that great in the first place.
All right.
So I stay away from CMON games. And I could see people staying away from TMG going, you've had some good games, you've had some bad games. I don't want to have to pay for a deluxe version of a bad game or a mediocre game.
Yeah, and there, again, there were some really good TMG games that came out, and there were some that were just fine. I mean, what was it like? They had Pioneer Days and Old West Impresario, and I think I don't know which ones were actually their designs in-house or that they brought over, but I think they brought over like Citrus. And of course, they had Yokohama and Orleans, and was the one. That's the one I own.
That does not narrow it down a lot.
Is it Gentis?
Oh, yeah, Gentes, Gens.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, again, that's a. I mean, I know you weren't a particular fan of it. To me, I thought it was a good game. I enjoyed the time aspect of it. And then they also, I mean, I don't know all the games that they did. I mean, they've done a lot of games. Again, I don't know. It's so hard nowadays to know which ones are actually a publisher's design versus just importing it.
Yeah.
But like any publisher, they've said, I mean, there were good ones, there were bad ones. For whatever reasons, they just weren't able to survive the what I can assume would be the lack of being able to get product. But to me, it just sounds like this was going on long before the pandemic.
But this kind of leads into a secondary thing of where we kind of started with this, with just the plethora of publishers now that you no longer have whatever 20 publishers. You now have hundreds of publishers that seem to publish 1 or 2 games, and then their stuff gets reprinted. And if it does well, then they continue to publish games. But because of that, because there's so many things that are now being published, that we get that the shotgun approach, which we talked about before. But when I knew what I was going to get from TMG, I know what I'm getting from CMON, but we talked about Capstone Games. When I pick up a Capstone game now, I don't know whether I'm going to get a deep, heavy strategy game anymore, because they seem to be splitting out, and then they split off to having that casual something, kind of their casual line.
Right.
So when I see Capstone, I'm like, all right, it's Capstone. Oh, this is in the casual line. At least they're telling me I'm going to be disappointed up front.
Well, it's just not for you. I mean, It may still be a good game, but yeah, I mean, I guess I understand why they do it, but it was certainly a lot easier, 5 years ago, when you knew, okay, oh, look, it's a what's your game product. I know what I'm going to get, or a Quinted game, or, I mean, Capstone wasn't around back then, but I think Capstone's kind of taken the approach of Stronghold, when Stronghold would just be they would bring in a lot of European imports, and they made a living off of it for a long time. I don't know if they do it as much anymore, other than, I mean, they're kind of hanging their hat with Terraforming Mars and stuff. And I think Capstone right now, if I had to say, here's a company that is going to import a good Euro game, it's probably going to be Capstone. That I would say would be my go-to. At least those seem to be the ones that are doing it. But
yeah. And I
anyways,
actually, the only other one I was going to bring up was Renegade Games, who, you want to talk a shotgun approach. They publish a game like every week, and they don't seem to promote anything. And some of their games are absolutely fantastic. Some of them are mediocre, but there's just so many of them that you have no clue what you're going to get from Renegade this week, which is kind of unfortunate, because I would think, not being a brand manager, that you want people to say, I like heavy Euros, I'm going to go and buy this company's game. And maybe that's not the way it works in the industry anymore. Now it's just like, I just care about the game. I don't care who publishes it. In that case, I could see why we have hundreds of publishers now, because the publisher doesn't matter.
Well, that's why we need reviewers that are going to give honest opinions about the game. Now, that could be a crapshoot, because maybe your tastes don't line up with theirs, but hopefully you find a reviewer that your taste lines up with theirs, and it's not just an infomercial trying to sell the game to you. But sometimes those are okay too. At least they kind of show you how the game works, and you make your own decision based off of that.
Yeah.
So, teach their own. Well, speaking of new games or getting games or whatever the case may be, I do have a question for you. So I picked up a game off Miniature Market the other week, and box was delivered, opened the game, started looking at it. So this is a game that I bought purely off the cuff. At first I just thought it was an expansion, and
you're excited, you realize the base game is like, just a base game.
No, well, so I thought it was an expansion, so I wasn't going to buy it because I didn't have the base game, and I didn't have any desire to have the base game because I already have Combat Commander, and I'm not going to, whatever. But this expansion was actually a standalone game, and it was on a topic that I really was interested in. And so I got it, and I opened it up, and I started looking at a few things, and I noticed that. So it talked about, in this game, you're going to be able to, refight the Battle of Breakcourt Manor, where the 101st Airborne and, Lieutenant Winters took out the gun positions. Now it's interesting to me because it's also one of the first fighting scenes from the limited or the mini series Band of Brothers, which was a huge success. Great series. I thought, okay, that's cool. I mean, because that's a small battle, but it's also one that, I don't know if it currently is, but for many years was taught in the military as a textbook example of how to take out a gun position. It was in their manuals. It was taught to whatever. So okay, cool. So then I started looking at the game, and it's got all these little chits for the different leaders in it, but there's no chit for Lieutenant Winters. I'm like, that seems odd. And then I start looking at the mission scenarios. And yes, it does have that scenario in there, and it does talk about, whatever. But then it just, and I don't get me wrong, I don't think they're doing anything misleading. I just think it was a really bad case of proofreading or fact checking, because and again, I could just be very nitpicky on this, but it talked about, it's talked about Delta Company was also present. And I'm like, but in World War II, they didn't use that vernacular. We didn't go Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. It was still Abel, Baker, Charlie, Dog. And I'm thinking, if you're making a game about a historical event and you have that type of error, it makes me question how much attention to detail did you really put into a lot of the stuff. And they had another one where they talked about, Colonel Sink of the 82nd Airborne. It's like, well, no, Colonel Sink was with the 101st Airborne. And if you know this, if you know this battle, if you know this, the history of this unit, it's very clear he was 101st. He wasn't the 82nd. And again, it's just, there were some little things in there that I don't know if obviously it isn't going to affect the gameplay, but it made me think, are there games like that for you? And I know you're not a theme person. Maybe it would be an IP based game, but if you bought a game where you were gung ho about, oh, I want to play this game because of this, and this, and then you start to see the errors related to that, would that take the wind out of your sails? Would it turn you off from wanting to play the game? Or would you just kind of, keep, fine, we'll play it? I mean, think of it, so like Aliens, you're a huge Alien fan. Mm-hmm. If they made an Alien game and it was, they had the name wrong of a character or, whatever, I mean, would that impact you?
I don't, it's hard to say, because I don't think the stuff that I am into, Alien or any of the other IPs I enjoy, I don't think I know them down to the detail that some people know their history. So yes, if you had Alien and the main character was, instead of Ripley, like Rapley or something like that, that would annoy me. But because of the stuff I'm interested in is fantasy, like it's made up, that they can always spin it to say, well, that's, this is Ripley's long lost, sister on a completely different thing, because we can make up whatever we want.
Right.
I don't think there's any real life thing, historical or city based. Maybe if it was a game that was set in Toronto, for example, and they got the streets wrong, I think that would annoy me. I don't think it would stop me from playing the game, but I think every time I sat down, they misspelt Young Street, or then they had whatever Woodbine going east-west as opposed to north-south. That probably would annoy me. And I'd be the same thing. It's like, didn't you guys fact check the map for Toronto? Because it's out there, just like the historical information is out there for your game. It would annoy me, but not to the point when I would say I'm not going to play it.
Right. Yeah. Again, I mean, it's not that I wouldn't play the game. I was so excited to get it and open it. And I again, I just was doing a cursory glance. And if in a cursory glance, I notice those things, I'm wondering, if I really take the time to dig into the rest of stuff. But again, I don't know if I care that much to be that nitpicky. I mean, I definitely being nitpicky about it, because again, that was why I bought the game. That's why I wanted to play the game. And now I'm just like, okay, well, now do I really want to spend time learning the rules when, I'm sure it's a me thing versus a.
But I think though it's because I don't have the same, love for the war games that you do. But I think it's critical to a lot of war games that these are based on, you're selling them as basically play the event and see how you go through it. If I was going to play a game that said relive the creation of the first rocket or whatever, to the moon, and they mess up Neil Armstrong or whomever was involved with that, it's like, well, then you're really not giving me what it is. I mean, you've messed up some fundamental things that you say your game is based on. it kind of puts me into the light of, I would still probably play the game, but next time you're publishing a game, it's like, well, if I really want to play that battle or really want to do this historical event, are you going to be able to do it correctly? Because obviously the previous one you didn't. So why would I buy your next game that's going to be based on something else? I'll wait for someone who took the time to research it and make sure that what was in the box was correct to the historical time period I am interested in and I want to play. Then I'll wait for that person to do their proper homework. I've done my homework. I've learned about it through whatever means. Why can't you? If you're going to tell me that this is a game for me and I know this time period, then you should make sure that it's correct in that time period I'm doing it.
Yeah, and again, don't get me wrong. I mean, I probably for every game, I'm sure errata exists, and I mean mistakes are going to happen, and I get that, and I, for as much as I probably have preached in the past that I'm not like one of those, I'm not a rules lawyer. I'm not one of those that's going to sit back and say, well, the reason they're doing this in this battle is because this rifle had a 20 yards less of accuracy than this other rifle, whatever. Usually I scoff at people like that. And so that's why even talking about it, I'm just thinking like, it sounds so minor and it sounds so, I mean, it just sounds like I'm being an ass. I mean, for the sake of being one, to be able to point out, or like I always feel like people that sit there and point that stuff out are just trying to make themselves feel smarter than other people. Like, well, this is not really right. The cording on the epaulet of the French hussar was green, not light green or whatever. So,
but I think it is there is a dividing line. Yes, you can get too much into the weeds and say, well, the examples you just gave up, but I think it's also dependent on how that game is sold to you. If it is a historically accurate representation of the battle that took place on this time, then I expect it to be historical accurate. If it is a generalized game of that time period and we just happen to throw in a couple scenarios, but to make it work with the rules, we've had to make some changes to it, then you can't get down to the weeds saying, well, honestly, right, like you said, the rifle is not as accurate for an extra 20 yards or whatever else. But I think if they came off and said, we are making the definitive strategic game based on this one historical event, then it better damn well be correct. Okay. If they're saying we are like Combat Commander, we are giving you a system, or even like Memoir 44, they're giving you a system to play in and they're telling you different ways to do it. Is it historically accurate? No, it's not. But they're saying gameplay is more important than historical accuracy. If it's on the opposite side to say, no, for us, historical accuracy is more important than the gameplay. Like we're gonna confine the gameplay because of historical accuracy, then that historical accuracy has to be correct.
Okay. So I'm not a complete ass, I'm just partial.
Yeah.
Okay. So my last thing before we get to first bites, and I want to, I was on BGG the other day, and of course, they have their hot games listed. So I clicked on the one because I'd never heard of it before. It's was it Aridia? It's ArYdia.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, let me look at this. It's like Aridia, the paths we dare tread. Yeah, whatever. And in the description, it talks about it's a it's not a 4X system, but it's a system based on 4 like pillars. It's like exploration, role playing, and 2 other things. And I thought, okay, well, so I was reading through it. Sounded kind of interesting. But what I found more interesting than any of that was, sometimes when they when you look at a game and you're reading the BGG descriptor, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting way of trying to sell the game. I found a couple things. Well, I found one thing in this particularly humorous, and that is, so you're reading the description on BGG, and it talks about under the role playing portion of it, it talks about the. Let me click on it here. So it's like role playing. Take on the roles of a wide cast of characters as you encounter them throughout their journeys. Step into the shoes of a disgruntled shop owner. That makes sense. A sniffling brat, all right, sure. Or a poorly dressed bandit leader. And I thought, what the hell does that have to do with being a bandit leader? Like, are you saying like he's shabbily clothed, or like he just threw his outfit together and it doesn't match? Is he wearing white in the wintertime? I don't, it seemed like a very interesting way of describing this particular person or this particular NPC in the game. And when I was reading, I'm like, am I just being nitpicky? But this doesn't make any, like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But it also isn't like selling me on the game. Like, I can see if you say like, a one-eyed bandit leader, or maybe I don't know. I don't get where the whole poorly dressed bandit leader thing is coming in.
Yeah.
Would that sell you the game?
As soon as you said role playing, it's like I'm out.
No. Okay.
I role played, actual fully RPG when I was in high school and university. I stopped it, and I have no real desire to come back to it. And any game that says there's role playing required, I'm like, no, forget it. Because I find, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of flack over this, I find a lot of games that have role playing in it, or it's because the rules aren't that strong. And there's like, oh, role play it, make it more exciting. You have to put equal amounts in that the designer did, because the designer really didn't do a good job. So you need to make the rest of it up by role playing your role. It's like, no, the gameplay has to be good. You can't rely on the players to say, we're going to forego the crappiness of your design or your components because we're going to role play. I think that should come out naturally from the game itself to say, I'm so invested, I'm so enjoying the game that I'm going to role play whatever. Anything that says that role playing is a fundamental piece of it, my first idea is, especially in Euro games, not for actual 100% role playing games, is, oh, okay, so you need the players to inject something into the game because the game is lacking on some piece.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we play tested this, we play tested it, we couldn't figure out what the hell to do with it, so it's on you guys now.
Yeah, so the gameplay itself is solid but not engaging. So role play it so you guys are engaged in the the dry mechanisms.
Right. What says the incentive-based role play system encourages you to engage in dramatic storytelling without being intrusive. So the game itself sounded interesting. So it's exploration, progression, combat, role playing, and it's referring to itself as quote unquote a green legacy game. And it says it features all the hallmarks of a legacy game: packages to open, hidden information, progression, discovery, exploration, all while wrapping it in high quality components, but allows you to reset the game when you've completed it so that you can start again or pass it on to someone else. And some of the stuff that sounds interesting. What I was more shocked about is I had never heard of this game, and it made close to 800,000 on Kickstarter.
And I had
Far Off Games.
I had not heard of it either.
It's an open world campaign based cooperative fantasy role playing board game for 1 to 4 players. So I don't know. Anyway, I just looked at it because it's on the hot list, and then when I read that description of the characters involved, I'm like, okay. I was waiting for like the sassy, the sassy hero or the whatever. It's like, but the poorly dressed bandit leader. I'm almost intrigued to spend the $100+ just to see how he plays. I mean, it could be a woman though. I don't know. It doesn't say. This is bandit leader. It could be male or female.
It's however you want to role play it,
I guess. I think I would show up to the games like in some sort of hideous outfit if I was going to play it. If you really want to get into your characters. So, All right. Well, anyways, that's I think we should probably get to first bites. So I was debating on my first bite, because my first bite, the only one I really have is a war game, and I've been trying to not bring war games into the podcast. I don't know really if anyone's interested. I think maybe there might be like 1 or 2. So what is your first bite? And then depending on time, maybe I'll talk about mine, or maybe I'll just skip mine and save it for a different time.
So I have 2. And I actually I've called mine. Well, I was on vacation for a week. I got like 19 games played. So I do have a couple.
That's kind of low. I didn't think you even got that many played.
Well, okay, so I'm calling two of these my first and last bites.
Okay.
So the first one is Expedition to Newdale. Came out 2 years ago from Alexander Pfister. And this is a story style game in which the game progresses and you open up, not so much you open up new boxes, but you add story cards and there's going to be a couple new mechanisms and things like that. Expedition to Newdale is kind of the sequel or the next in line from his Newdale series. So it started with Tybor the Builder and then Oh My Goods and then Expedition to Newdale. And it's a card game. It's a Euro card game in which you have there is a map in front of you and everybody starts in the same city. And that map in front of you actually changes from game to game depending on which story you're telling. So you start on the forget which beginning map it is. And there's a story of what's happening. You need to go off and go to Newdale. So that's why it's called Expedition to Newdale. So you start in your home area and you are going to be playing cards. And it's a very interesting card mechanism that you are playing the cards and it's you start off with 2 workers and you are putting your workers on the different actions to do. Those actions are going to be getting more cards, getting money, giving up cards to get money, getting another worker into your hands. So next round you have 3 workers, but you only have 6 rounds per game, 6 or 7 rounds per game. So it's really short. And you are building buildings, like you're building the farm, and then from the farm maybe you can build the wool place that will shear your sheep and things like that. So you're doing all this type of thing, and you're spreading out your houses on the board to the different areas that are connected to you. And then there is for each chapter of the story, there is at the end of the game, you need to do this. You need to be able to turn 4 barrels of wine in to get, 3 points, but you can trade in, X amount of money because each good is worth a certain amount of money. And the way it works is you only have cubes. So if I build a farm and let's say I get cattle, I put 1 cube on my farm, it represents a cattle. I could then have a slaughterhouse, which produces meat, which will take the cattle and convert it into meat. So then I move it over that same cube. And now it's a meat cube. And then that meat, maybe you could dry it and, make jerky. And so that would, you then move it over to another one to say it's jerky. So you can either do production runs like that, or the other interesting thing for this game is when you turn the chapter card, the story card over for each round, it's going to tell you how many workers there are. 2 red workers, 1 blue worker, whatever else. There's 4 different colors of workers. And my cattle card could be that I need 2 red and 2 yellow workers to produce another cattle. Or even for the meat one, it could be I need 3 blue and 2 green, or I need a cattle cube coming in. So there's kind of 2 ways that you can produce on a card. When everybody's finished, you lay out all your workers, then you pull 4 workers out of the bag and add them to the labor field. So that's going to adjust how many of each color you're going to have. Then you activate wherever your chits are. So you can either going to do production on your buildings, or you're going to take one of the actions, go through the game, and whoever has the most points at the end of the round wins. And it will then say at the end of the game, breed this. So then that tells you the next part of the story. So then you reset the game and we'll say, okay, for this time, use board B. And you're going to start in this city and add these cards as your story cards for this round. And then here's the overarching story of this chapter. So you go through all the chapters, and at the end of the game, it basically says, okay, you've basically completed Newdale. So it's not legacy in terms of you're not putting stickers on the board. You're not getting new information. It's just like a story that's told in chapters. Both Lyle and I enjoyed this one. The biggest problem I had with it is every game starts the same. There is although it's a campaign game, you're not carrying anything over in your campaign. So if I have a stronger worker at the end of game 2, I lose that worker at the beginning of game 3, and you're reset to the same way as if you were, game 1 in the very first chapter. And each chapter does that. So there's complete reset of, okay, well, you remember the last game that we had that you were this person and you were able to get, we had to pay tools to get weapons. Cool. I got weapons at the end of the game. Start of next game, you have no weapons because you're resetting. There are certain cards you're going to be adding to the people deck, and those are distributed randomly at the beginning of the game, saying, okay, well, this time you are playing this person, or you have this person in your group, but it doesn't really change the gameplay that much. The other thing that we had was our mission cards or secret objective cards that you get in game one that you never add any to for the rest of the game. And all the secret objective cards are the top part is different, and it's going to be get your houses into these type of villages, because each type of village will have a symbol and a flag type. So it could be like a triangle flag with a diamond on it. So you want to go to all the diamond ones. The bottom part of the secret objective is always the mystical areas. So everybody wants to go to mystical areas. Doesn't matter how far you get in the game, you always have the same set of secret objective cards. And it got to the point when we were in game 5, 6, and 7, it's like we just gave them face up because it really didn't matter. Just because I see you going after diamond ones or you're going after this type of flag, that makes no difference to me. I can't stop you. So what does it matter? We were hoping that you're going to be adding more secret objectives as you went along, but you don't. You're getting the same secret objective every single game. You're doing this. Each chapter, you're going to be doing essentially the same type of thing, which you are saying, well, I need another worker. So my first action is to do this, my second action to do this, my third action, and then I get my next worker. Oh, look, you did exactly the same thing I did the first round of the game. So why are we continuing to play the first round of the game? Why can't we start further on to say, if you are in chapter 4 out of 7, I've already played 4 games. Why can't I move? Why do I have to start at position 1 like I did 4 games ago? Why can't I start with a third worker? Why can't I start with an extra building? Why can't I do other things? So I enjoyed the gameplay of it, but at the end of it, and this is why I'm calling it the first and last fight, because Lela and I played the 7 chapters in a week, and I don't think I'm going to go back to the game because I've played the same game so many times that I'm like, 7 times for me is enough. I'm done with Newdale. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed the gameplay itself. I just wish there was more to it. So I think if maybe we spread it out more, it would have been more enjoyable, because we literally sometimes played it 2 times in a day. The games don't last that long. We played it 2 players. So you're looking at, 60 minutes, an hour and a half per game. So it's not overly long. The fundamentals of the game are enjoyable. It's just the storytelling, I felt, left a bit to be desired. It's almost like he designed the game and then said, oh, I could add chapters to this. But I don't want to change the fundamental gameplay, because you don't have to play it in chapters. You could literally just sit down and just play the game with completely ignoring the story. But adding the story doesn't add a whole lot to it, which I felt like a missed opportunity. So that was Expedition to Newdale from Alexander Pfister.
Yeah, I've had this game for a couple of years. I've played it a couple times, only in the solo mode. And so I think this was like one of my S-list games a couple of years ago. I was excited to get it, but I think it's a typical Pfister game from the standpoint of he likes those story modes. If you look at a lot of his games, what is it? What was it? What's this, the card one? All My Goods. And he's got a couple expansions for that. He's got Tybor the Builder, and even Maracaibo's got the story mode to it as well, or they might call it a campaign mode. I'm not sure. So it's typical of the type of games that he designs. Having only played it solo, I think I don't remember if I was playing it through the story mode or not. I played it a few times, but I found the problem for me for the solo play was at the end of the game when you have your objective card, you want to have this at the end of the game. And in a normal game, the way you were saying it, is you might want to have whatever, I don't know, 4 cows or whatever, but it gives you the opportunity to either trade in or sell off other things that you don't need in order maybe to get the things that you do need. If I remember correctly, does it do that at the end? It gives
No,
you some options on trading stuff in or
you,
something,
so the very last thing you do is you can rerun your production.
right?
So normally to produce at a building, you have to put a worker there.
Right.
So like one of your, you know, you start with 2 workers, you can get up to 4 workers. So each round you have to be able to place a worker on a building to activate it to, produce meat or hides or whatever based on your cattle. The last thing you do is, irrespective of your workers, you can run all your production. And then you can say the card will be, we're looking for hides. So if you given, $8 worth of hides, because hides are worth, let's say, $4 each. So if I give up 2 cubes, that's $8 worth, you get 5 points. If you give up $20 worth of hides, and you get 12 points, whatever. But that was it for the end of the round thing, was just sort of, here are the goods we want. And depending on what the dollar value you give us of these very specific things, then here's the points you're going to get.
Okay. Was it, trying to think, was it always just one good, or was it there?
It could be multiple. Yeah.
Right. There were different, I mean, there were different types of goods at the end of the game that you could,
Yeah.
that they were looking for.
So it could be
Is that
that
what it was?
Yeah, because it could be things like, oh, you need to feed the barracks at this site you've come across. So they will take bread, and they'll take meat, and they'll take cheese or milk,
Okay.
or whatever. So you could give up a combination of that, and it was always give up these goods, and depending on the dollar value that you're giving up, then that's how many
Okay.
points. And there's always 2 options, and it doesn't matter if you overpay. So if they say we want $20 worth of food, and you give them $40, well, you get the same points. There's no advantage to doing that.
So I think here was the difference then between the multiplayer and the solo player, because I remember playing it solo and I felt very restricted. I want to say in the solo play, there's only one good that they want. So it didn't give you like with multiplayer, like, oh, I could go for cows, or I could go for milk, or I could go for, whatever. And the solo play, I'm pretty sure at the end of the game, you needed to have whatever, 15 of this type of item. And that was it. So it felt very restrictive as far as how I was approaching the game. Like, it didn't give me, so, because the cards are kind of coming out at random as far as what's available. And sometimes, I mean, if those cards aren't coming out, they're just not coming out.
Yeah.
So from what, and again, it's been a couple of years since I played it solo. I did enjoy it. I thought it was a good, I don't know, engine building game. And I remember thinking, this is a game that I'd probably want to play multiplayer versus solo, because it just felt kind of restrictive. Now, the other thing I kind of like about the story modes, although this one maybe not as much from the way you described it, was that in most of these games, you can start at any chapter in the story you want. Like, if you've played through it, you've played all through the 7 chapters or whatever, and you come back a year later, you could say, well, let's just start with chapter 5. Because it isn't really going to impact your game. You just have to know the cards to put into the deck or take out or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know if it truly is going to play that much different. I'm assuming it just gets progressively perhaps harder for the amount of stuff that they want. But I don't know if they would really change the amount of stuff you want, because you said you're not carrying anything over. So,
I think you could sit down and say, I'm going to play chapter 5, for example. And the only thing and the nice thing on the back of the rule book, it says, okay, if you're going to do chapter 5, use this board. This is where you start. This is how you see the story card deck. And, these are the optional rules that are available. So you could do that, because the game itself is kind of, the actual gameplay doesn't change. There's just that little story piece on the top or bottom that changes. So if you say, I'm not going to worry about the story, and you just play with the components for that chapter, you're fine. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that he hasn't come out with an expansion deck for it to add to the story mode, because, I mean, he's had a couple for Oh My Goods. I think, they're coming out with expansion for Maracaibo, stuff like that. So either maybe it just wasn't well received, or, maybe there's one in the works.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because at the end of the campaign, it's like, okay, you've now arrived at Newdale. wait for the next game in the series.
Hmm.
So I enjoyed the story. It was light. And
Yeah.
I just wish that there was more to it, but the fundamental gameplay is enjoyable. It's a good,
Right.
solid game.
Okay. So do you want to do your second one?
Sure. So my second First and Last Bite is another Pfister game, and this was one called Cloudage.
Yeah. Okay.
It was, and again, we've played through the story of it, and it was the same idea. There's a story to it. You start in chapter 1 and you kind of go up from there. This one I found not as enjoyable as Newdale. I felt the fundamental gameplay of Newdale was more enjoyable than a Cloudage. So Cloudage, you are on this devastated planet that there's no water to it. It's barren desert, and there's certain towns on the board that you have the Cloud Militia. So it's a kind of, I guess it's an evil force that is basically capture all these cities, and you are an airship, and it does have a couple neat mechanisms, but I just felt the gameplay wasn't as interesting. So you start with a hand of cards, 5 project cards they're called, and you have a deck of navigation cards. You have 1 0, I forget what the 1 0 3 1s, 2 2s, and a 3. I think that's what the makeup of your deck is. So you shuffle those all up, and on your turn, you're going to say, I'm going to give up energy to get some water. And there's a little track there that tracks how much energy you can give up versus how much water. And you can increase that as the game goes on. You're then going to turn over 2 cards. The lowest card is going to be how much energy you produce that round. And then the higher card is how far you can move. Once you do that, then you are going to move your airship from where it is based on the card value that you turned over. And there's some ways to get up, like you can upgrade your airship to have more speed. You can have it to have more guns. And there's a technique later on in the game to be able to replant the growth on the world. But whenever you move, you have to end up on a city. So you have to go from city to city. You can never end over just the desert. So most things are like 1 or 2 spaces away, and quite often cities will cover multiple hexes. So it's, even if you only have a movement of 1 or 2, you can probably get to the next city. If you go to another city that does not have one of your cubes in it already, you have to you fight the militia. And the militia will say they have a strength of 3, for example, in the city. So you look at whatever your strength is of your airship, including any project cards you built. And if it meet or exceeds that, you win. If not, then you spend energy to flip over more of your navigation cards and just add the navigation points to your attack to try and beat it. You don't have to beat it, but if you do, you're going to get some bonus. You put your cube there. Whether you win or lose, you put your cube there, and you can never go back to the same city to fight the militia. So it's a one chance. The first time you go to the city, you have a chance. Win or lose, you're going to be placing your cube there, and you can never fight them again. You just go on to the next city to fight the next militia. Once you do that, once you're at the city and fought the militia, you then go into what I consider a more interesting phase of the game. There is a city section of the board, like it's technically a separate board that's got 3 decks of cards in it. There are 8 cards in each deck, and they're put in this sleeve. And the sleeve has a sticker that you have to put on before the game starts that has a cloud on it. So it kind of obscures like 80% of the card, but you can still see little bits and pieces around the edge. And this is, for me, the most interesting part of the game, if you can call it a part of the game. So you have a little drone meeple, and you can put it under one of these cards on one of the 4 squares. Each square represents a different type of thing you can get. You can get more cards, you can get more energy, you can get more water, you can get metal. Those are the 4 resources of the game. So if I look at the cloud obscured card, I can say, well, this looks like there has a lot of energy production plants on it, because each card shows like a city that has different quadrants in it. The metal producing quadrant, the energy, the water, and the buildings, which represent cards. So it's like, well, I hardly see any water. So I think it's only going to give me a low amount of water, but I see a lot of energy production fields. So I think it's going to give me a lot of energy. So I'm going to put my marker on energy. Then Dean, as the other player, can say, okay, he kind of piggybacks off my action. So he has to pick one of the other 3 squares. So he might say, oh, I'm going to, although there doesn't look like there's a lot of water, maybe there's a big lake in the middle. So I'm going to put my marker on water. So then you remove it from the sleeve, and it will tell you in the middle of it, okay, if you pick metal, you get this much metal. If you pick energy, you get this much energy, etc. And there are two other things that could be on the cards that are thinning out your deck and being able to do a build. So you get the resources, and then then you return your drones to their start spots, and then it's Dean's option to move one of his drones to one of the cities. So you can take one of the cards like I just did, but there's also a build action. So you have a hand of project cards that are going to tell you this project card requires 5 water to build. So you may put it on build. Dean, as the active player, gets 2 builds. As the non-active player, I get 1 build. So you're going to be playing out these cards onto your airship to do different things, but they also require resources, and they also require you to discard a card. Every card you play also forces you to get a card out of your hand. So quite often at the start of the game, you pick the 5 card, you dealt 8, you pick 5 that you want to keep. Those are the 5 cards you want to build. Well, in your first build, which card do you get rid of? Because you have to get rid of a card. So I'd like that. Of course, there's more ways to get cards. As I said, when you're taking the city cards, one of the options is to get more of these project cards. So you're going to be going along. As you drop in cubes, it is progressing the game along. For 2 players, you play 8 rounds. And after round, was it 2, 5, and 7 or something like that, there is a little book that says, okay, stop playing, read the next card. So that's how the story progresses in this game. So you kind of get 3 or 4 story points during the game that you're going to be reading cards that are going to be progressing. And quite often, some of those are going to be, oh, this city is under attack. Do you as a group want to protect the city? Or do you want to, are you going to protect them by sending ships, or are you going to protect them by sending metal, for example? So then you make a choice as a group. Then you pull out the next story card that at the bottom of it will say, at the next story event, you have to give in 3 metal if that's what you picked. So you're going to be progressing it, and then you turn that card over and it says, okay, if at least half the people did it, read this card. If less than half the people did it, then you read this card. So it's kind of like a branching story based on how well you're doing. We never had any difficulties fulfilling these things. It's fairly typical Euro. The first couple of rounds, you're only getting a couple water. By the end of it, we're using the 5 chits because there's no single waters left because we have so much water between us, even with building. The story was stronger in this one than Newdale, but the gameplay of this one felt even more repetitive than Newdale did. Because that first round, you're going to the same city every single time because you're starting back at scratch every single time you play the game. Your navigation deck never gets upgraded. You're never allowed to keep any upgrades that you've built on your ship. You never keep any cards from round to round. You're always starting off with exactly the same components as you did in the very first game. The only difference between chapter 1 and chapter 3 is you get a new ability to plant trees. Those trees don't stay on the board though. They come off at the next game. There are some legacy tiles that you're going to be adding that overwrite something. So next round, if you discover the city or help this person out, it's like, okay, we'll put this legacy tile on the board here. Next game, that legacy tile does stay. But my ship is still as crappy as it was in round 1. Like if I've spent all this metal to upgrade my speed to the top speed, you telling me the next game, what, my propellers fell off and I got to rebuild them? So again, that being reset back to the initial stage made those first couple rounds of this game. And again, you're only playing 8 rounds. And if the first 2 or 3 are almost identical every single time you play the game, it's like, okay, can we just skip this? Can we just skip to round 3 and, take 2 upgrades and take this project card? Can't I spend resources at the end of the game to say, I'm going to take this 1 card and put it in my slip, so next time I play, I start with this, with this better ability? Why do I have to be reset every single time I play? And it just, again, I think he designed a single game and then said, let's throw a story on top, but I'm not going to stop you from playing singly. Like you can go in and just say, I'm just going to play the scenario. And there's scenario cards in there as well that don't tell any stories. Just, okay, for this scenario, you got to do this. Okay, fine. But the game itself is not as enjoyable as Newdale. Like what I'm doing round to round. I really like the card picking ability when you're kind of looking through the clouds to determine which quadrant you want to pick.
Mhm.
But is that gameplay? I'm not sure. It's just like, okay, this is the card I'm going to pick, whatever else.
Yeah. I guess so. I'd be curious to know from, from the designer, because a lot of his games have the story mode.
Yeah.
And most of them always tend to reset you. And I guess I'd be curious to know from him why he makes that choice. Is he doing it because he wants to reset the playing field for everybody, so that you don't have, if someone wins the first couple of games, they're not so far out in front of everybody else? Because we've seen, you see games like that, especially like in legacy games, where it kind of tries, like Rise of Queensdale does it, and I think
Yeah.
Charterstone I think does it, stuff like that. So I get why they do it. Or is he designing the game that, like you said, it's really more of, yes, you can play it in a story mode, but I designed this game that really is just, you can choose which scenario you want to play. You can choose which chapter you want to play at. If you want it to be, maybe you really like the chapter on, I don't know, where you plant the trees, then you can just play that chapter over and over again. If you're just doing one-off games and you're not playing through the story mode. So it'd be curious, because he's obviously making that decision for a reason, because he's doing it over and over again.
Yeah, and the problem I had with both of these games was, compared to something like Maracaibo, I feel stands very well on its own without the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a good, solid Euro game that's kind of crunchy, and I really enjoy it. If you took the story mode out of Newdale and you took the story mode out of Cloudage, the game itself is not nearly as strong as Maracaibo, because I have played Maracaibo many times and I've enjoyed each play. I've now played Newdale 7 times. I've played Newdale was 8, Cloudage is 7, I believe, whatever it is. Again, I'm calling this last bite. I can't see myself going back to either one of these games to play it standalone, but I can still see myself going back to Maracaibo to play it standalone, because the gameplay fundamentally is more enjoyable, I found, than Cloudage and Newdale.
All right.
So for me, Newdale, I could almost see playing it standalone, because I really enjoyed it. Cloudage, you are getting resources to build cards. That's it. And
but the
fights are not interesting, because it's literally like, well, I've upgraded 2 of my EMP cannons, and I built 1 gun. I can kill anything that's 3. Oh, there's a 3 city. I'll go there and just get 3 water. And then I have a hand of cards. And what we found was some cards and some end of game scoring seem to be way out of whack. So again, you have mission cards. Same, secret objectives from Newdale are now mission cards in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll say, okay, well, if you can get to firepower of 7, for example, you get 3 points. So the very last game that we played last night was the final chapter of the game. Lel and I both had firepower mission cards that are different, but so subtly different that it didn't make much difference. Hers was, if she can get to, I forget what it was, 7 firepower, she gets 10 points. Mine was, if I had 7 firepower at the end of the game, I got 2 points. Wait, what? How is this equal? And again,
well, it's not. 7's more than 2.
Yeah, exactly. But we had to get the same requirements, but she got more points for it. And sometimes it is, you can get a second mission card during the game, and usually you will. So you start with 1 mission card that says, okay, you want to get your technology level up to 8, for example, and you want to have a lot of blue cards, because there are the 3 sections of your player board are green, blue, and yellow, which represents like the different phases. So you want to have a lot of blue cards. You get another mission card, and it's going to have another 2 missions on it, and you're supposed to overlap one of the other, so one of the missions is covered up. And once you've made that decision, when you get that second card, you can't change it. But sometimes you're going to get 2 of them that are, you need to go to these 3 cities, and you need to go to these 3 cities. There's no way you're going to 6 cities, because quite often, because the board is quite long, it's 4 tiles long. we never got to the very end of the fourth tile. I got to the fourth tile, I think, twice, but you can't be zooming all over the board because you move relatively slow. So yes, you can get to the end, but you're not going to be stopping at 6 cities in between.
All right.
So you're only going to be you're going to be covering up one of those city missions. And the city missions were usually, as long as you meet 2 out of the 3 cities, you get the maximum points. So it's like, okay, so why? Like, why give me 3 cities and tell me I only have to introduce 2? Because it's usually 1 at the beginning, 1 in the middle, and 1 at the end. So you're telling me I get no bonus for going to the one at the end? So why give it to me? And you're not getting any new missions throughout the game. The missions you start with round 1 or chapter 1 are the same missions you have for chapter 7. Why aren't you introducing more things into this deck? So the project cards do get added to throughout the game. You start with a deck of this, I forget how many project cards it is. You add like 6 project cards through the entire game to this project deck. Wow, isn't that fantastic? Some chapters you're adding 1 project card to a deck that's already like 60 cards deep. So you may see the next game, you may not. And they're usually, you're looking for this person and you can find them during the game. Like when they pop up, this, okay, put this project card next to the city board. And if someone, blah, 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 if someone meets this requirements, they get it. Otherwise, well, at the end of the game, it always goes back into the general pool. So if you were able to meet the requirements in game 5 to say you got this special person, you get them for that game. Next game, they go back to the general pool so someone else can get them. No, Dean found it. Why doesn't he get to keep it? It's like, no, we're going to reset it. And you have to re-find all these people again. And now the project. So you and I are competing people trying to do this stuff, but this engineer goes from my ship to my game. And next time you find him in the middle of the desert through these project cards, now he's on your ship. It makes no thematic sense. It was just, yeah, I have a problem with this type of stuff.
That's what I was going to say is that it's so refreshing because for someone who says he's not a theme person, you were getting really worked up about the thematic disconnect in this game. I think you're a themer through and through.
For me, it wasn't so much the theme. It was that one game didn't impact the next game. And if I'm going to be telling a story, it'd be like reading a novel or fantasy novel, whatever you want to read. Say in chapter 1, you know, the fighter finds a sword and he learns how to use it. Chapter 2, he's lost his sword. He finds a sword and learns how to use it. Chapter 3, he's lost his sword and he finds another sword and learns how to use it. It's like, no, we've already been through that. You need to continue my story.
Have you not read the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
I read it once.
So I guess my question, because you talked about in Maracaibo, but so you've played Newdale, Cloudage 7-8 times. Have you played Maracaibo that many times yet?
I've played Maracaibo. I've never played the Maracaibo story mode.
Right.
I've played Maracaibo by itself, say 5 or 6 times.
Okay. I mean, and the only reason I was asking is because I think, I mean, granted, if the story mode's not that good, the story mode's not that good. But I also think it's one of those where by playing it a lot of times right in a row, you know, that could influence it. But at the same time, that shouldn't, I mean, if you play a game 7 times in a row, I say it shouldn't really impact how you feel about it, but it always does. I mean, you just get burnt out on stuff. And I don't know. Did Blackout Hong Kong didn't have a story mode though, did it? Well, maybe it needed one. I don't know.
No, once was painful enough for that game.
So I think so. I haven't played Cloudage yet. I do own it. I knew when I bought it, I'm like, whatever. I'm not thematically, it's not that interesting to me. And I also thought it probably wasn't a good sign that it literally came out and no one had like ever heard that Pfister was putting out this game, at least not here, like, you know, in our circles or whatever. So it was kind of a surprise. I was like, well, that probably can't be a good sign that it's just being, you know, slipped out there. I mean, obviously I'm going to play it because I like Pfister designs, but I do think that, I mean, if while they don't necessarily always sell their games as, this is a campaign game, this is a story game. I think because they give you the choice of really how you want to play it. You don't have to play either one in a story mode. I think you should get more enjoyment out of a story mode just because you would think you would, right? I mean, you play something in a story mode or, excessively like a campaign style. But maybe not everyone plays their games that way. Maybe there might be some people that never play the story mode.
Which would be fine. Again, I'm going to go back to Maracaibo. You don't have to play the story game on that mode to have a good, solid game. My problem is for Cloudage in particular. If you took the story mode away and said, I'm just gonna lay out the boards, I'm just gonna play it, the game's okay.
Right.
It's nothing great. Newdale was more enjoyable as a base game than Cloudage was. Cloudage, again, had a better story, but the fundamental gameplay was, once you've seen that the card cloud mechanism, it's still enjoyable trying to figure out what it is, but it's just sort of, it's another thing that you do.
Yeah, it's not the engine building of Newdale.
Yeah, because it's literally like, okay, Lila and I got into the rut. Okay, we're going to spend the energy to get water at the beginning of the round. Flip over 2 cards. I gain 1 energy and I get to move 3. I'm going to move here. I've already defeat these people. I get the 2 metal, for example. Then we move our things. Okay, you're taking the water on this card, so I will take the metal on this card. I'm going to do 2 builds. Next round, I take the card. You do 2 builds. Because only one person gets the card. And quite often building up your cards is going to be useful as well. And those are, I'm not going to say the cards are unbalanced, but there are some cards that just give you victory points. And one game, I almost lapped Lala. So it's a 50-point track that you kind of go around. I almost lapped her because I got all victory point cards that are in that deck. And it's give up 13 water and a card to get 10 points and move 2 up on the technology track. I had 3 of those. And I had no problem getting water. Because the further you are up on the technology track, the more energy you can give up to get more water at the end of the game, and also gives you points. So here's this card that gives me victory points, moves me up on the track, which gets me more water and more victory points, so I can play the next one I had in my hand. And I was reading through the rules. Is there restrictions to how many times I can play these? Like, can I only have one? Or like, are all cards unique? In which you can only have 1 copy of this? But it didn't seem to be. So I just laughed her and she was like, oh, that wasn't fun. So the next game, I started off with 1 or 2 in my hands. And I said, I'm going to discard those at the beginning of the game because they're completely uninteresting. You were just literally buying victory points without having to do any work. So I actually discarded them for my initial 8 cards that you get, because you get 8, you'd have to discard down to 5. I just got rid of them and said, okay, I'm going to try something else because I know that works. It's boring as hell. So let's just go into something else.
All right. Well, I'm still going to give it a try. I guess I'll play it with somebody else. So if I bring it out to you, you'll just swipe it off the table.
No, like
I will give Fister credit though, because it sounds like, at least with Cloudage, whether or not you want to call the card slaving thing a mechanism or not, at least it's something different.
Yeah. And Cloudage is worth a play. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm just saying, if you're going into expecting a strong storied legacy game, you're not going to get that. You're going to get a story that almost feels as if you play a normal, like if you think of Descent or you think of Gloomhaven, the story you get in Cloudage would probably 1 to maybe 2 chapters in Gloomhaven that's spread out over 8 in Cloudage, because the story is kind of interesting, but it's so thin that he's taken out a very thin story and kind of spread it out as thin as he can over 8 games. But then the gameplay itself, you're going to enjoy it. But if you want to remember what the story is, you need to play the games closer together, which means you're going to get kind of burned out in the gameplay. This one I really think would have benefited from not having a story. So you could play it the full game and then put it away for a month and bring out the full game again. And you'll have a much more enjoyable time than playing it, than trying to finish off the story So like anything, you don't want to leave it too long. You're going to forget what the story is. And especially with a thin story like this, if it doesn't matter, then get rid of it and just play the game every once in a while. I think you'd have more fun with the game than just say, I'm going to ignore the story in Cloudage and just play the game for what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our first bites. Expedition to Newdale and Cloudage. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. We're going to do a top 5 list, and this list was Graeme brought up the topic. So, Graeme, why don't you explain what this top 5 list is?
So, Dean and I have done an awful lot of top 5 lists. We've done probably 50 or 60 on this podcast, and we did almost 80 on talking across the game board. So we're trying to think up with new ideas. And every once in a while, we talk about games, top games that we haven't played. Dean with its Dominion, or me with whatever game in the top 100 that I haven't played yet. And we have tried to keep our fingers on the pulse of gaming for the last decade or so, but there's always some games you're going to miss. So I thought, why don't we go through the Board Game Geek rankings and basically find 5 games that we've never even heard of before. So these, for me, all these games are 600 or higher. So between 600 and 1. That when I went through the list, I kind of went, that name doesn't sound familiar. I have no clue what this game is. And yet it's ranked high. For me, anything that's ranked, 1,000 or less in a database of 20,000 something games are probably decent games. So I said, why don't we, the pair of us go through this? It'll be interesting to see whether there's games on either one of our lists that the other person has heard of or played, because it would end up on my list as I had games from like Reiner Knizia and Martin Wallace that were published around a couple of years before I got into gaming. And this is one of the difficulties with, constantly playing new games, is I got into gaming just over a decade ago. And you consume everything you can, but you're consuming usually stuff that is new, that's coming out when you get in or going forward, or classics. Games that have been around for 5, 10, 15 years that people say, oh, you got to play that. This is the best game. This is the, the first game of this type of gameplay. So you go back. But the ones that were released a couple of years before you got into the hobby are no longer on the hotness. They're too new to be classics, but they're not new enough to be the new hotness. And those, for me, the ones that I found on my list are the ones that made my list, because they were released usually, right around that time, that never hit my radar back then. So most of these games I wouldn't mind going back to play. Like I found them and I looked at the description to figure out what they were. And yeah, I'm looking at them going, okay, yeah, I want to play these. So that's how this list came to be.
All right. So when we go over our top 5 lists, our number 5 is going to be the last game that we found as we were going through it. And I did say that I started at number 1. I worked my way through the list. So my games range anywhere from my number 1 is in the 300s and my number 5 is in the 600s. So I know Graeme was probably thinking all of mine would be in the top 100, but
well, and I just also discussed this with Dean before we started recording. I basically made 2 lists. I made one list that I'd heard of the game, but don't know anything about it. Then I did another list, which was, I haven't even heard of this game before. So we decided to go with that second one, which is, I've never even heard of this game before. You look at the name, you look at the title going, I've never heard anybody talk about this. I don't know anything about it. So that's where I went from. So for me, the games I'd heard about, but don't know anything about, for example, my top one was 120, which was Endeavor Age of Sail. But I knew about it, but I don't know a lot about it. So that didn't make my list.
Okay. All right. Well, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my number 5 is a zombie game called Dawn of the Zeds. See, I'm going to
Victory Point Games.
Yes. So it is a it's an action point game where you're battling off the zombies. There are 3 different editions of it. So the one that appeared in the top, so this was ranked 543 was the third edition of the game. So there's a second edition and first edition, which were higher ranked, like in the thousands or something like that. I don't know why this particular edition, maybe because it's more approachable. Like it's more out there.
Yeah, I think it was a Kickstarter game, and it was also a little more blinged out. The original ones were Victory Point games, which are, generally pretty sparse as far as the components and stuff. I mean, they're still good games, but I think this one, I don't know if this is one of the last ones Victory Point put out, or if this is one of the first ones that the company that took them over put out. But I'm 99% sure it was a Kickstarter game. But yeah, it's a well-revered game.
Yeah. So like I looked at the title and I thought initially it was just going to be another stupid zombie game. But then looking at the description going, again, this is one I wouldn't mind playing, and it's very highly ranked. This edition that's this highly ranked is from 2016. I think the original came out 2010, something like that, 2009, 2011 timeframe. So again, this kind of falls into when I'm first getting into the hobby. I miss this one because Victory Point Games, they're not a huge company, and a lot of their games aren't, going to make the hotness because they're more of a niche market. But yeah, this one, Dawn of the Zeds, third edition, looks like a game that I'm sure Dean has in his collection somewhere that I can play.
I actually do not own it.
What?
I know. It's a zombie thing. That's probably the reason.
Yeah.
Not necessarily my favorite. So, all right. My number 5 is a game that at first I thought maybe it would make Graham's list, but it didn't. Doesn't sound like he got this far down. So it's ranked 693 on BGG. It's a Martin Wallace game, and it is called Tinner's Trail. Tinners, like you're a tinner with copper. Tinner's Trail, and it was re-implemented by, I think, it says re-implemented by Tinner's Trail, which doesn't make any sense. Same title. Anyways, came out in 2008. Martin Wallace game, 3 to 4 players, just under a 3 for the weight. Plays about an hour, 90 minutes. And I had never heard of this game. And I like Martin Wallace games for the most part, but I think maybe because it came out in 2000, and quite frankly, the cover does not look very appealing at all. I think this was put out by his own publishing company. And it's a Euro. It's auction. It's got some action points. I don't think it would probably appeal that much to Graeme because it is an auction game. There's dice rolling in it, and it has to play 3 to 4 players. So that's probably another reason that it maybe, I wouldn't say it's not successful because it's ranked 693. So obviously it was pretty highly thought of at the time, but I've never heard anyone talking about this game, at least not in the last 10 years. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's got let's see here.
Well,
it's got 43 copies available in the aftermarket.
But we'll just wait for the new edition. There's a new edition coming out this year.
Oh, is there?
Tinner's Trail. Yeah. So I have heard it. I haven't played this one, but I have heard of it. And I knew that it was getting a reprint this year as well.
Who's putting the reprint out? Do you know?
It is Alley Cat Games, at least in North America. Phalanx is the British company. So I guess they got the Euro.
Yeah,
distribution.
I'm just wondering if it's going to be a well, the cover is already better than the other one.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? It's got the guy waving like bye bye. I'm gonna go get Black Lung. I'm off to the mine.
But the first one looks like it was done in paint shop.
Yeah, it looks like it was done something. This new one's got some nice chunky meeples.
Yep.
And this one now is 1 to 5 players.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Well, every game
3 to 4 to 1 to 5.
Every game now, especially during the pandemic, has to have a solo component in it.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying even for, to drop it from 3 to 4 to 2 to 5, and it's still an auction game. So, yeah. All right. Yeah. So what's your number 4?
So my number 4 is a trick-taking game. It's funny because it's a game called Skull King.
Never
ranked
heard of that, huh?
523. Oh, I assume you have?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And it's funny because it says it's a similar to a game called Oh Hell, which is before I got into board gaming. 15. Well, we used to every Friday night go over to neighbors' houses, and these 3 neighbors used to get together. And one of the games we used to play was Oh Hell. We played that every week for like 3 years. So this is a trick-taking game similar to that, but instead of is a bidding game where you have to bid how many tricks you're going to bid. But it's all, that part is done simultaneously. And then you go into the trick-taking, and if it's anything like Oh Hell, the first round you get 1 card, and the second round you get 2 cards and 3 cards, and you kind of go up, and then you go back down. And I enjoyed Oh Hell, so I'm assuming I'll like Skull King as well. But this is, again, trick-taking games are never part of the hotness. So this came out in 2013. I didn't, at that time, didn't play a lot of hobby trick-taking games. If I was going to play a trick-taking game at that time, I would just use a regular deck of cards, which would be kind of your classic trick-taking games like euchre or spades or, Oh Hell or whatever else. So this one never hit my radar. And by the time I kind of got back into more of the hobby side of the trick-taking games, this one was too old for me. So this is my number 4, Skull King.
Yeah, Skull King is a very popular game. Very a lot of people talk about it as it's a great intro style game for non-gamers. And I think it's because it's a card game. It's very similar to like a euchre or maybe even if people know how to play spades or stuff like that. So yeah, you still see people talking about it on social media, or if they make posts about great gateway games. Skull King is very well liked. I don't own it, and I think the only reason I've never owned it is because I got a lot of trick taking games. But it's put out by I think is it Grandpa Beck's? I think that puts it out, which isn't necessarily renowned for their games, but this is probably I would imagine this is probably their best selling game that they've ever come out with.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 4 is a game that the only reason it sounded vaguely familiar to me is I think I don't know for sure, I think it's based off of a video game, but I had never heard of the board game, and I don't even know for sure that it's a video game. It's just in my mind, that's how it's coming across to me. And if I had seen it before, I probably didn't pay attention to it because I think it's a space theme. At least it sounds like it would be a space theme. But that game is ranked 649 on BGG, and it's called Super Motherload. Have you heard of this game?
Oh yeah,
Have you played it? You probably own it?
I don't own it actually, because I could never find a copy of it. This game, I believe, was originally a Korean game that got republished in North America. And I think it's supposed to be like a take on Dig Dug, the way it plays.
Yeah.
From the old arcade game when you kind of going down.
One of my favorites.
So like I said, I wanted to get this game. I'm just never been able to get a copy of it when it was released. But yeah, I know about it. And I always thought it looked kind of cool. And it's fairly highly regarded in terms of, some people really say this is an excellent game.
So it's not, I mean, I know Dig Dug. I used to love Dig Dug, one of my favorites. But other than that, there's not like a video game or anything that this is based off of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And I probably just made that up in my mind. Yeah, looking at it here for the first time, it looks like it was put out by Roxley, and they generally have pretty good components and stuff. And I do see the one screen that does have a very Dig Dug-ish feel.
Yeah.
So it says deck bag, pool building, hand management, set collection, tile placement. Yeah. I mean, this is one that I definitely would try.
Yeah.
For sure. Now that I've actually seen it. Because it's not nearly anything that I thought it was going to be by looking at the title of it.
Right.
I'm surprised you don't have this one.
Like I said, I tried to get it when it was first released, and Roxley Game put out a couple of games around that same time. They also did the Steampunk Rally. It came out about the same time, and neither one of them I could get a copy of.
Didn't Roxley, weren't they the ones that did Santorini?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Well, it looks like there's 13 copies for sale in the aftermarket, and all the ones in the US are $35. Yeah, maybe I'll pick it up.
Yeah.
You get it for 40 on Amazon. I don't see any Canadian copies. Huh, yeah, I might check this one out. Because when you said Dig Dug, I'm like, oh, that brought back memories. It does look pretty cool. I do like tile placement. All right. What's your number 3?
So my number 3 is, I'd be surprised whether it's been funny that you and I have kind of been going back and forth with the games that we have heard of before.
Right.
This one I highly doubt that you've heard of. This is called Earth Reborn. Came out in 2010. It's a weighted 3.
I guess I must have, since it's not on my list.
It's ranked 511. And
See, I base part of it on the name of the title, but also the thumbnail to jog my memory. So
this one is by the looks of it, there are lots of components. There's minis, there's cardboard pieces that it looks like you put together to create maps. It's kind of all over the place. It says the classification, the categories are adventure, bluffing, fighting, miniatures. So there are 9 scenarios. I'm going to walk you kind of through, I guess, the overall mission. And it says there's going to be missions of rescue and retrieval and escort through areas of the lab, mansions, towns, and more. Each scenario builds upon the rules of a new chapter. So basically what they're doing is they're kind of starting off small, and each chapter adds more and more and more to it. It says it also has an innovative SAGs, which is scenario auto-generating system, where you can create your own missions and maps. Okay. So in other words, you give me a bunch of tiles I can put together however I want.
right.
It is it says 2 to 4 players. There are 2 factions in the game, so I'm assuming if you play 4 players, you kind of split the factions with someone else. Like I said, I know very, very little about this game. Even from reading the description, I'm really not sure how this works. It says it includes Tetris-like board construction using polynomial floor tiles, an order tile system to give commands to your miniatures. You can do duels, and you can interrupt that with bluffing and phasing systems and color arcs based on line of sight, which is, didn't Tannhauser do that as well? And there's a search rule. The search rule, giving you a visceral feeling of searching in rooms to find equipment. Really? What do I have to find? Do I have to search, like hunt my house and say, if you find a dirty sock, you can find something in the real game? So, this one, this is kind of the first game that I'm saying, although I haven't heard of this game, I'm not so sure I'd hunt this one down to try. I think if Dean had a copy of it, or a friend had a copy and they want to play, I'd play it. But this is not one I'm dying to go out and try, even though it is ranked, what did I say, 511.
Yeah.
This for me, I think I'll skip this one. So that is my number 3, Earth Reborn.
Yeah, obviously I looked at the thumbnail, and the thumbnail must have made me think that I had heard of it, but I'm not sure that if I've heard of it, I wasn't interested just thematically. Mechs and that sort of thing do nothing for me. There are 56 copies available in the aftermarket, and there are a few from Canada. There's one here in the US. It's only a good version, or a good condition of it, but you can get it for $15. It probably costs you a hell of a lot more than that in shipping, based off the size of the box.
And what I'm worried about with this style of game, because there are so many of these games that kind of have come out. So weighted 3.9. So obviously it's a heavy rule book.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, it sounds like it's just minis working, like going across a map, which means there's probably way too many rules for a game that's really just go here to pick this up to take it over here.
Yeah, it sounds like they tried to do everything there in the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it was really popular when it first came out. I don't know whatever peaked at as far as overall rank. It's one of those things I wish BGG would tell you. But yeah, I think this one I would have zero desire to play.
It won an awful lot of Golden Geek Awards, or at least was nominated, but
did it win any Dice Tower Awards? Because those are the ones that matter. All right.
2010, I think it was before before Dice Tower Awards.
Oh, okay. Well, my number 3 is a game that's ranked 519, came out in 1990, and I've never heard of it. Now, when I'm just now clicking on the page here, I will say I'm a little embarrassed to say that I've never heard of it, because it was actually an Avalon Hill game. It's not considered a war game, though. It's considered a strategy game, and that is the Republic of Rome. Republic of Rome came out in 1990. It's 316 in the strategy genre, 519 overall. And it says it was re-implemented by the Republic of Carthage. I mean, it's got some pedigree names too as designers, but this must have been, well, 1990 I would have been into miniature gaming much more at that point in time. But it's a political game. It's typical of Avalon Hill. I mean, well, I know you won't like it, even though you probably love the theme of it, but it does say it's semi co-op. It's variable player powers, it's voting, it's dice rolling. So all things that you generally don't care for. But it looks really cool. I mean, I don't know if it stood up to the test of time per se, but the fact that it came out in 1990 and it's still ranked that high obviously means it's not getting a lot of negative votes anymore or now. There's 21 copies for sale and they're going for $200 a pop on the aftermarket.
Oof.
So you get one on eBay for $275. So obviously it must be, I mean, it must be a good game. People are getting that much for it, or the fact that it's still ranked that high. But I'd never, when I looked at it, when I saw the cover, honestly, what I thought it was going to be is I thought it was going to be more like a Axis and Allies, Age of Imperialism style, one of those big coffin box games that was very light on theme, very light on mechanisms, and just a dice chucker. But this is a 4.34 for weight. Oof. 1 to 6 players and plays in 300 minutes. So definitely not a light game. Definitely not anything I thought it was going to be. So I would probably be interested in playing it like it as a con game, maybe, but I don't think I want to own it. Not at that price. Yeah. So anyways, that's my number 3.
Yeah. I had not heard of that one. So it's funny that we're moving up the numbers, but we're getting less games that either one of us have heard of.
Right.
So this one, I'd be interested to know whether you know anything about this game. So this is my Martin Wallace game from 2004. This is called Struggle of Empires.
Yes. Let me pull it up, but if it's the cover, I think it is.
Yeah. It's got a big warship on it.
Yeah.
It's set in the 18th century. You're going to be one of the major powers in both Europe and the colonies. And when war breaks out, you have to form alliances with other people around the table. So it's 2 to 7 players, and it says Board Game Geek says it's best with 5 to 7 players, which I could definitely see. But once you make an alliance with another player, you can't backstab them. So it's not like diplomacy. If I make a commitment to Dean that we're going to fight this war together, then we will fight this war together. When the war is done, we can split up. It's a weight of 3.59, and it says it takes 3 to 4 hours to play. And it's one of these games when it sounds as if it's probably best with the higher player count. So there's several strikes against this game for me for this game, even though it is a Martin Wallace game. But that's probably why when this came out in 2004, again, it's in that time period when it's not old enough to become a classic. When I got into gaming, it was still that relatively new stage. But this would have been one, as a new gamer, I wouldn't even look at this. So yeah, this one, Struggle of Empires by Martin Wallace, is definitely my number 2. And even looking at it now, I think maybe a couple of years ago, I would have been more interested in it. I do like Martin Wallace's older designs, but the weight and the play time and the kind of player count, I'm not so sure when I'm going to get a chance to sit down with 7 people for 4 hours to play a heavy game. And if I do have that, I'm not sure this is the heavy game I'd pull out off the shelf. So that is my number 2, Struggle of Empires.
Yeah, so this is one that I don't know if it was. So this had a couple different versions of it. And I think, oh, hold on, let me scroll back. So if it's the same one, so the cover that they're showing on there right now, I think is going to be the new version of the version that just came out recently. So they made a deluxe edition of this. Eagle Griffin did, like in 2020. But the original cover is the one that I was thinking of, where it's got a couple different people on the front cover. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the cover of this game before in the original version of it. It's got like a European, it's got a native, it's got a ship right in the center of it. It's more hand drawn than anything else, but it's gone through a couple different iterations, and it's been called a couple different things as well. But yeah, the version that when I saw the title, I assumed it was the version that I thought it was, which is the older version. And you can still find the older version for sale, actually quite a bit in the aftermarket. I've never played it. It's one of those games where everyone says it's really good, but again, you're going to need a full complement of players. It's going to be a time commitment, and it's going to be a rules commitment as well. But I would play it just because it's a Wallace game, and because of I like those big multiplayer games like a Here I Stand. But let's put it this way: the older version, like the original versions, you can get for almost nothing. Now the deluxe one, I don't know what it goes for, but I mean, you can get the original versions for probably $20 at the most. But okay. Well, my number 2 is a game which I'm sure you probably heard of, and this one actually came out in 2020. So I told Graeme this is one that maybe because it was 2020 and without getting a lot of gaming in, I wasn't paying as much to some of the games coming out. I think even when I looked and saw the title of this game, I assume this is I assume it's a space game based off of the title, which is another reason I probably wouldn't have paid attention to it. But that is The Search for Planet X. Came out 2020, ranked 462, which again is I'm not surprised that I don't hear about games based off of how many come out and based off maybe the theme of it. I don't pay attention to it, but the fact that this game is ranked in the top 500 means it should be a good game, I assume, unless it's just a bunch of people getting on there and inflating the ranking. But yeah, this is one that I don't know anything about.
It's a deduction game. It got a huge amount of buzz end of last year into 2021. I haven't played it. Like I know of it. I've seen gameplay video of it. I haven't bought it yet because my group is not huge into deduction games.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do like deduction games, then I think this is probably one that you'll enjoy. Because it's thematic. You're looking for Planet X, but it's a lot of there's predefined logic rules in the game that you have to kind of work out. And if I remember correctly, you can take different sets of clues depending on how specific you want them. So of course, the more generalized the clue is, I think it's because there's a time track. I think it's the less generalized the clue is, the less you have to move on the track. And if you're looking for like a really, really specific clue, then you have to, you zoom further. And I believe
there's an app for
it. I was about to say, I think there's an app for this as well.
Yeah, this is nothing that I thought it was going to be. I thought this was going to be like a space exploration game based off of the title.
Yeah.
It's put up by Renegade.
Yeah, and again, Renegade Game just kind of pumps them out. But this one got a fair amount of buzz. But again, if you don't like space games, you don't like deduction games, this one would probably fly under your radar. But this is one that I would like to try this one because I do like deduction games. And trying to work out, I think you're trying to work out where this planet is based on the influence that has on the other planet. So that's where your kind of logic comes into it. But yeah, this one I know about. This one is another one I want to play.
Yes. Before you go on number 1, speaking of deduction games, did you see they're coming out with a 2-player version of Cryptid?
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that because I know I'll never have enough players to probably do a multiplayer, which I think the original one, you probably want to play at least 3 players. Yeah. I'd be interested to see how they implement it as a 2-player game though. But, all right. So what's your number 1?
My number 1 is my Rana Knizia game. And this is a game called Taj Mahal. Okay. Ranked 468 overall. Plays in 45 minutes to 90 minutes, weight of 2.99, 2 to 5 players. They say it works best with 4. The reason why this one probably would never hit my screen, I'm not sure hit my table. I'm not sure I want to play this one because one of the main actions is bidding and auctioning, which I'm not a big fan of. You're going to be trying to gain the most influence points by placing out your little pieces on the board, and you're going to be doing an auction kind of every round or bidding every round to, I believe, where you want to place your things. I find Reiner Knizia has a couple of games I really enjoy, but his catalog is so big. I find the majority of Reiner Knizia games I'll pass on. And because it seems that almost every single one of his games has come out with like 5 different titles from 10 different publishers that are all the same game, just maybe have a slightly different theme to them, I tend to stay away from Knizia games. And when you say that this is an auction one from Knizia, it's like, even though it is ranked 468, obviously an awful lot of people like it. I mean, it's got over 7,000 ratings, and if it's still at 7.3, it's good. But that whole auction bidding thing just kind of turns me off. And having Knizia, it's like, no, I think I'll skip it, even though I don't know anything about it. Because honestly, if you say name all Knizia's games, I don't think anybody could. I don't even think Knizia can name all of his games that he has published. This one just kind of got lost in the shuffle. And again, this one's from 2000. So it is an early, earlier than I was in the hobby. So yeah, this one I just passed by. And because of the designer and the kind of pedigree of his other stuff, it's just one that I have just always, like I said, even the name didn't ring a bell. And honestly, when I saw Taj Mahal, it's like, well, that could be from anybody. And I'm sure that there are more than one games with the name Taj Mahal out there. So yeah, that's my number one, Taj Mahal from Reiner Knizia.
Yeah, so this game, I haven't played it. I have seen it. I've looked at it. And I think part of it is, I mean, you get some people that are just Knizia, fanatics. And so they're always talking about all these great Knizia games. And I've heard people talk about it. I've seen it. So it had the most recent printing was 2018 by Z-Man.
Still called Taj Mahal.
It's never been re-implemented in anything else. But I think, when it first came out, I want to say, so I think it was like, is it Alea?
Yeah.
And then I think it had a Rio Grande production, which probably didn't help it any. And then now it's got Z-Man. So I'm sure it's probably out of print by now, with it being a Z-Man game. But yeah, it's not one. I mean, I'm kind of like you with Knizia. I like some of his designs and I don't like, some of the other ones. And this one being, a 3 to 5 player game is probably just not super conducive. But I do remember, I mean, that the box cover they show up there is the most recent one.
Right.
So I do remember seeing it. I think maybe it was at one of the origins or whatever, but okay. So my number one is, let me see. Let me pull it because I don't remember I don't think it had a famous designer because, I'm pretty cool and in touch with most,
You're hipster in board gaming.
Yeah. So this game came out in 2016. I'm gonna have to say it's a self-published game. It's put out by Megacorpin Games, and the designer is Ron Gonzalo Garcia. It's called Awkward Guests.
You haven't heard of this one?
I have not heard of this game.
Because that's
when I first saw it, I'm like, I was thinking, what's the one? Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, that's not this game. But I don't know. I have not heard of this game. And I'm assuming it's kind of a party game, maybe.
Yeah, and it's so when it first came out, it was a very small company that did it, but it hit huge. Everybody was loving this game. It got a reprint, or I think they went to Kickstarter and it is being reprinted.
Mm-hmm.
I know Tom Vassal loved this game, and he was really pushing it to get it reprinted. And that's how I know about it, because because he loved it so much, they showed it off several times on the Dice Tower. So I've heard of it through there. So I know how the game play. I don't own a copy, but yeah, because he was saying it was one of the best deduction games he's ever played. And I like deduction games. So I'm always kind of, whenever you say it's a deduction game, my kind of ears perk up, which is why I've heard about this one.
Yeah. So the first edition was Spanish. Second edition was Spanish, 2017. So the English edition didn't come out till 2019, and that was by Megacorp Games.
Yep.
And then 2021 editions are German, French, and Chinese. So 2019 looks like it was the last English edition.
Yeah.
I don't know. Everything looks like it's in black and white.
Yeah. Oh, it's kind of sepia tones.
Okay. Again, if I heard about it, it didn't register.
Right.
And it's probably not one that I would gravitate towards watching, like for a playthrough or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'd be willing to play it, I guess. I mean, obviously it's ranked pretty darn high, 362.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised with it's 362, but from my understanding, it only got a small print run. Like it's not like you can walk down to your local game store and just pick this up off the shelf, because I don't think it was widely published.
So it looks like they're doing a reprint of it in 2022, and it's being renamed. I don't know why. So it's being renamed Scandalo, like
Okay.
Scandal and then OH exclamation point, but all one word. Seems like a stupid name. But it also says it's a weight of 3.0. That doesn't seem right, is it?
Well, I think it's the gameplay itself is pretty simple. Like it's almost say it's like it's a clue weight
Mhm.
in which you are just trying to exchange information with other people, making sure that you're not giving away any more information than you're required to. So the rule set is pretty light. I think it's the deduction piece that makes this game heavier.
Yeah, so this one unique deck or brilliant deck system. Each play a different scenario. Players have to bring a scandal to light. What is the scandal plot? Which celebrity is behind it? I don't know. I mean, I'd play it, but I don't think I'd have to play it before I'd ever want to buy it, because I think it's going to be, again, it's one of those where you're going to have a big enough group to play it. And if I'm going to do that, I think I'd rather play Time's Up.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. As much as this one kind of intrigues me, I'm not going to be rushing out to buy it. I would want to play this at a con or something like that to give it a shot. Because it does sound, I think it's one of these things when it's going to take maybe not necessarily a long time to play, but you kind of need to get a group of people that really enjoys deduction games and wants to play deduction games, but also doesn't take it. I always find deduction games, there's a very fine line. There's the people that don't like it. Then there's people like myself who enjoy it, but don't take it overly serious. Then you get the extreme of people that take it extremely serious and pull out the spreadsheets and let me check the logbook and, 14 moves ago, they moved to this square, or, you said if instead of and in the sentence, like, okay, you're taking it to, I want to play with the people in the middle.
Right.
Who just,
yeah,
who enjoy deduction, but don't take it, that aren't treating it like it's life and death.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, that's my number one awkward guest, or Scandalo, as it will now be referred to, I guess, in 2022.
You should have stuck with awkward guests.
Yeah, I guess maybe the original thing was at a dinner party, I'm assuming, kind of like a Clue dinner party if someone dies.
Yeah.
And this is more about celebrity scandals. So I guess it makes sense. It's a weird, I mean, no one's going to search for that on the internet and be able to find it. But yeah, again, I think of all the ones that I have, I think I'd be willing to play 4 of the 5 that I had on my list. I don't think Search for Planet X would be one that I'd be too hot and bothered to try. But I might pick up Super Motherload, $30. I mean, depends on what the shipping is going to run me, but yeah.
Yeah, for me,
interesting.
I was kind of hit and miss on my list. So the Dawn of the Zeds and Skull King, I would like to play. Earth Reborn, maybe not. Struggle of Empire, I'm sure it's a good game, but if I'm going to get that many people for that heavy a game, there are other games I'd rather play. And Taj Mahal, I don't know. In some ways, it looks like an abstract strategy game with auction and bidding.
You just hate Knizia. Just admit it.
I admit Knizia turns me off of games more than I'm intrigued by his games. Yeah. There are some Knizia games I really enjoy, But if you say this is a Knizia game, my first thing is, oh, okay, well, I'm not expecting much then.
Which I'm sure there are probably some people like, I can't believe, that I mean, how dare you touch the third rail of the hobby by not being a Knizia, apostle, but to each their own.
Yeah, but again, he's got such a wide variety of games that almost anybody can find a game that you either really like or really dislike from Knizia.
But yet you got Eric Lang, who you would say just reskins everything. It doesn't have a wide array of games, and you don't like his either.
I like Blood Rage.
You're so hard to play.
I like Blood Rage. I think Blood Rage is an excellent game that he did.
He should have started and stopped there. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the thing is, he started with Chaos on the Old World.
Yeah, I understand.
And now he's finished for now in Ankh. So he's got 4 games that are all pretty much the same.
And he's not with Simon anymore, is he?
No,
he left. Who is it that's with Simon now? Is that Travis Chance? Is he with Simon?
I'm not sure anymore. Everybody moves around so much. I'm not sure who's with who anymore.
I swear, I think that's who's with Simon now.
Sounds like high school. Oh, did you hear so and so broke up now?
That's right. That's right. Who's Simon dating now? and sadly, that would be the name of some kid probably next year.
Yeah.
All the names you see on the internet. I should have named maybe we'll have another kid and I'll name him Simon.
But speaking of, not knowing this Knizia game, I would love to hear from our listeners how completely out of touch we are because we haven't heard of these games before. And again, these are games that when I went through the list, and same thing with Dean, I never even heard of these games before. Like, these are top 600 games, 700 games that didn't ring a bell, nothing. Obviously, this completely passed us by. So are there games that you have that are like that? Or do you love one of the 10 games that Dean and I had talked about? So
very good.
Are any of them worth playing?
Yeah. Well, and I think, so we're going to wrap it up, but I do want to throw out there that as we're approaching our episode number 100, we had talked and we thought it'd be interesting, cool, whatever. If any of any listener wants to contribute, you could do one of 2 ways. If you're interested in coming on and joining us in a Zoom thing to talk about the game, or if you just want to do it as an audio clip and submit it, or maybe we can, we can always.
It's going to say, even if you send an email, we could read it out.
Yeah, you can send an email, or if you want it as an audio clip, we can arrange for that as well. But we thought about soliciting from from you guys and gals. Over the episodes, we've given a lot of suggestions for what we think would be good games. And we thought this would be a time for you guys to sound off on either a really great recommendation that we gave, that you went out and you bought the game and you loved it. It's a hit. Your family just can't, they beg to get it to the table. Or maybe if there was a game that Graeme suggested that was not a big hit, that he was way off the mark, that you bought it, you spent your hard-earned money, and Graeme let you down.
I still say Strange Vending Machine is worth the money.
Right. So we thought it'd be interesting to hear from you guys. It could either be a great suggestion, it could be a bad suggestion, whatever. Give us some, if you want to join us, give us some feedback for the 100th episode. We thought it'd be, because a lot of podcasts, they'll have their 100th episode and they bring on all these designers who tell them how great they are and how great their podcast is. We thought, we don't want to hear from designers. We don't want to have our egos inflated anymore from that. Let's hear from the people that make us, the people that support us, and let them have their opportunity to, I guess you could inflate our egos by telling us what a great game choice we gave, or you could totally destroy our egos by telling us so many of the bad choices that are suggestions that Graeme gave you over the years.
Limited to 10.
Limited to 10. Yes, please don't come with your top 20 list. So anyways, if you're interested, you can send us an email at boardgamebuffetpodcast@gmail.com. You can send a note on Twitter at Board Game Chats. Find us on the Facebook page, Board Game Buffet Podcasts. Many ways that you could reach out to us. So let us know if you're interested and what form you would be interested in doing, whether it's joining us for the for the video recording and the audio for the podcast, submit an email, submit your own audio clip. Let us know. We're open to any of them.
And we are going to be recording the 100th episode probably mid to late September. So if you are interested, please let us know, by the second week of September.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, that's going to do it for me. Anything else, Graeme?
No, I think we have rambled on enough. I said, didn't like we say we're going to keep these short from now on, and that lasted for like one episode.
Yeah, well, that was the goal. I'll just, well, first of all, I can always tell you the video version of this podcast is always longer than the audio version, because when I have to go through and I edit it, I generally will cut out chunks of it where we tend to ramble on. So if you want the unedited version, watch the video. If you want the director's cut, listen to the audio version. All right. As always, please take care of yourselves and your loved ones. See ya.
See ya.